So, okay. So one thing is like growing up, my parents always had like certain little lessons they would always try to teach me. And I realized now that I was like getting like existentialism for kids, even though they didn't really think about it that way. Because like I was growing up in the Bay Area, and this was like during like the tech boom, and my mother worked in Silicon
Hmm.
Valley, and my dad had worked in the defense industry, like in a corporate environment at Lockheed Martin. So I'd hear all these work stories from both of them growing up about the people they had to work with, and the workplace politics and all this stuff. And so it was kind of like a study in human nature for me to hear from my parents their impressions of what other people were like and what was motivating others to behave
Hmm.
the way they did, and the kind of social psychology about how these kinds of places worked. And one of the things that my parents both always said, sort of for different reasons, but they came to the same conclusion. They always try to tell me, is like, Stephen, other people, they don't really care about you. Like they're focused on themselves. And they weren't saying that
Hmm.
this is how things ought to be or that I should be that way myself. They weren't saying, well, be selfish, ignore others, just get what you want. They were trying to, I think, explain to me why I should feel free in life and not feel pressured to be a conformist, right? Is that
Hmm.
people get so preoccupied with what they think others think about them that they fail to realize that everybody is just as equally concerned about what they think others are thinking about them, right?
Yeah.
And so this gets to the heart of this whole like prestige question or chasing a reputation. It's like, okay, well, you could make the decision to go to Vanderbilt or Harvard or as a student, or your parents want you to because you think it matters, but nobody else really cares, right? Like, I went to
Hmm.
Oxford. When I go around town, I don't get a discount at the coffee shop.
Yeah.
I don't walk
That's
walk in.
true.
I don't walk in with my cape, right? I mean, no one cares, right? Nobody cares. Nobody
Yeah.
asks me. And so again, I think this is also why we're seeing like an increase in mental illness and disaffection, is that a lot of people are starting to realize like they made choices thinking that there were going to be sort of benefits for them that they no longer get. So, you go to Harvard, you
Hmm.
pay all this money, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're living in Brooklyn, like spending $3,000 for a room while you work as a barista. You're going to be angry about that. So I guess what I'm trying to say here
Yeah.
is that you know clout chasing, looking for a reputation, thinking that going and being part of one of these institutions will matter. There's a lot of flawed thinking involved, and I think in that calculus. First problem is that these institutions are increasingly losing the reputation they used to have. Second of all, is that even if
Hmm.
they still enjoyed the reputation they once did, no one else really on a day to day basis cares that that's what you did, right? They're just interested in impressing
Hmm.
others for what they've done. Um, and like the anecdote I wanted to tell you is a little while ago, I went back to California to see my parents, and I was in the airport there at San Luis Obispo, which is a small little airport. And there were these two mothers that were probably like, I don't know, in their late 40s and early 50s, and they were on a college visiting tour with their kids, high school kids. And they were visiting all these different universities to see which one they liked best. And they had just visited
Hmm.
Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and they
Hmm.
evidently loved the school, and they were talking about how their kids were thinking that might be the place that their kids want to attend. And of course, I went to Cal Poly, and my parents live in San
Hmm.
Luis Obispo, so that place in California and that university was a big part of my life for many years, and in some ways still is. And it was funny to me as like this middle-aged guy sitting there in an airport in California, what used to be his hometown, getting ready to fly across the country to Winston-Salem. They have no idea who I am. They have no idea that I went to Oxford. They have no idea that I've published all these books, some of which, if their kid ever took a philosophy class, they might be assigned to read. And so
Yeah.
I had this like really intense urge to just tell them like, hey, just so you know, like,
This is who I am.
well, I mean, but I could see them be like, well, who cares? But that's the myopia of life, right? It's like, well, Johnny's got to go to Cal Poly, but it's like, well, ma'am, who cares? Like Johnny could go to Cal Poly, study philosophy, go off to Oxford,
Hmm.
write a bunch of books, and he'll just be me sitting next to you, and you don't care who I am. So what are you worried about Johnny? Eh, And so
Yeah.
there's this kind of social illusion that like going and getting these degrees and seeking out these sorts of accolades is somehow valuable or important, and I just don't think that it is.